And on behalf of Livable Hood River and the Hood River Valley Residents Committee, I'm really pleased to welcome you to this informational forum on the Westside Area Concept Plan. Both of our organizations advocate on land use issues in specifically Hood River. And we advocate within Oregon's unique statewide planning program in its 19 goals. And the first of these, goal number 1, is public involvement. So land use, the Oregon way, doesn't just allow public participation, it requires involvement from ordinary citizens to get the best results. So nobody knows Hood River better than you people do, and you are the people that live here and that work here. So we're really excited to see everybody here. This is a great turnout tonight, and we're really excited that you want to learn more about this important planning project. And we hope that you'll leave this evening today ready to play a part in shaping the plan for the Westside area. We also want to thank members of the City Council, the Planning Commission, City and County Planning staff for attending tonight. They've got hard jobs making important decisions, and we're grateful for their dedication to our community. Our first speaker tonight is Heather Staten. Heather is the Executive Director for the Hood River Valley Residents Committee. She also served as a consultant grant writer for Transportation Growth Management Funding for the Westside Area Plan and serves on the Project Advisory Committee. So everybody please give a hand for Heather.
Hi, thanks so much for coming tonight. When you put on these sorts of things, you never know who's going to show up or if anybody's going to show up, and I'm so glad to see such a nice crowd. As Doug said, public involvement is goal 1 of Oregon's land use system, and I want to say to you too that planning is not a spectator sport. It is something for everyday citizens to roll up their sleeves and do work on. So I'm so glad you're here tonight. My job is to condense 450 pages of project documents into a less than 10-minute talk. Who lived here in 1983? Great. Well, this is me in 1983, and I didn't live here. But as you can see, lots has changed in those 34 years. 1983 is also the last year that the city of Hood River comprehensively planned for the Westside area. And a lot has changed there too. This is an aerial map from 1983. And I think the most interesting thing to look at is what you don't see. If you live in the Westside area now, chances are your house wasn't there. All of those subdivisions, plus also the Hope subdivision, Sunrise, many more, didn't exist back in 1983. You've just got orchards and fields. Back when Hood River was planning for its future in 1983, the people who were planning it didn't imagine that we would be the hub for a major aeronautical and technological company. They barely imagined that windsurfing or tourism would be a thing. We didn't know about climate change, and we didn't have the internet. A plan that's right for 1983 probably isn't just right for 2017. And so it's really good that we're planning for this area now. Also, Oregon makes us plan. The state of Oregon makes every city periodically have a look at their comprehensive plans and update them. And the city started that process in 2015. They did what's called a housing needs analysis and residential building lands inventory. And those sound like kind of technical things. What it basically is they look at their demographic projections for population growth for the next 20 years, and then they check out how much land they have, and they see if they've got enough land to house all those folks that they're expecting. And so what are we expecting in 20 years? We're expecting to grow by about 50%, so 4,500 people, and we think we're going to need about 2,000 new homes for those folks. Along with just the sheer numbers of people, the housing needs analysis also delved more into the demographics of what the population is like. And that's changed a lot since 1983 too. The thing that I thought was the most interesting was that fully a third of Hood River households are one person living alone households, so single person households. Millennials and baby boomers, our 2 biggest generational bumps, both are more likely to be 1 or 2 person households. So we've got more households without kids. We also, because of the baby boomer bump, have an aging population. And Bonnie New is going to talk some about what that means for housing. And we're also more ethnically diverse than we've ever been before, with 26% of people being of Hispanic descent. You've probably heard a bunch about housing affordability, and if you look at the real estate ads, you know it's a big thing in Hood River. I wanted to give you just a few data points to shine a light on this. The median house price right now that's being listed in Hood River is $449,000. That is affordable only to the top 15% of people who live in Hood River. The sort of normal rule for affordability is that you shouldn't spend more than a third of your total income on housing. Meanwhile, the median house income is $64,000, and fully half of our population make less than $15 an hour. And I also wanted to show you the housing cycle. And most of you have kind of lived through part of this. This definitely describes me. So in the top left-hand corner, I lived with my mom and dad, and then I grew up, went to college, started work, moved into an apartment, left my family home. Then I met this really hot musician, and we shacked up, and we got ourselves a little flat, and that's us there, the young couple. And then we made a mistake and had a baby. And we bought a little bungalow, 700 or 800 square foot bungalow. And then our family grew again, and now we're in a bigger family style home. And I expect when we get old, we're going to decide that that home is way too much for us, and we're going to want something smaller again. And Hood River's housing market right now provides a lot of stuff on the left-hand side of the table and not very much on the right side. So you're not getting many apartments, many condos. And now the other thing that the city did was they mapped the land that they have in the city. And this inventory shows all the stuff that's green is land that's already been totally built out. And the stuff that's red and blue is either vacant or partially vacant, so it's available for development. So when people ask me, how do you know where the houses are going to be? It's a really simple answer. The houses are going to be where there's land. And the black outline shows the Westside project area, and you can see that most of the land that's available for development is in the Westside area. So what else did we find out in the housing needs analysis? We found out that we've barely got enough land for 20 years without expanding the urban growth boundary. So we have to be really efficient with the land that we have to use it really well. We've got a mismatch between our housing stock and what our population needs. We've got a lot of 1- and 2-person households. We've got a lot of lower income households. And we're building and selling $450,000 houses. So we've got a deficit of affordable housing and also a really small supply of multifamily, and that means things like duplexes, triplexes, apartments. So what do you do when you find out all these things? What a good city does, and also what the state of Oregon makes you do, is we have to do planning. If you find out you've got a deficit of housing that's affordable for your population, the city has to do things. The state doesn't say what, but the state says you have to make an attempt to find ways to house your future and current population. So enter the Westside Area Concept Plan. It's funded by a Transportation Growth Management Grant, which is a program of the Oregon Department of Transportation and the Department of Land Conservation and Development. And it's transportation growth management. So there's a big transportation side of it. So this thing isn't just about housing, it's also about roads and bikeways. And there's also a growth management part of it. So we know we're going to grow. How do we do it well and make sure that we have a livable city with the kind of quality of life that we're used to and we love? This is the Westside Area Vision, and I'm not going to go through it, but on the little piece of paper you got for the program, the back side of it has both the vision and it has the guiding principles that the consultants are using in putting this plan together. And like I said, it's not just housing, it's also great neighborhoods, streets, bikes, parks. And they started with a really old-fashioned concept, which is like a traditional neighborhood. And the things that this map are showing you, there's 3 neighborhoods, and there's also 2 commercial districts. And the neighborhoods, they sort of drew those by how far a person can walk, sort of a quarter-mile walk, and sort of 5-minute walk is what basically defines your neighborhood. And so the plan is looking out in the commercial districts, how to make, among other things, like how to make Cascade a nicer gateway, a more inviting gateway to Hood River. And then in the neighborhoods, they're considering things like, would a coffee shop, would small-scale retail make a neighborhood more inviting and more fun? It is somewhat about housing. That's definitely a main part of the plan, and this is the one example of a land use framework. All the different colors that you see there represent different zoning categories, and they're labeled R3, R2, R1, and those are all different kinds of residential zones, and the different numbers indicate there'll be a whole set of code that's associated with the number, and it'll tell you what kind of building can go there, its development standards, like how tall it can be, how big of lot it has to have. And one of the main ideas behind the land use program, especially on the affordability side, is to make more land available for both multifamily housing, so more land available for apartments and duplexes, and also to allow smaller footprint buildings and smaller lots as a way to deliver more affordable housing. And the way it does that is this. Currently, in a lot of these zones, the minimum lot size is 5,000 square feet. Well, right now, a 5,000 square foot lot is selling for about $200,000. Once you add permit fees and system development charges, you're pretty close to $250,000. So before you've built a thing, you've spent $250,000. And so if you're looking at housing that would be affordable for someone who could pay $300 or $275, you know that it just doesn't happen in Hood River on a 5,000 square foot lot. However, if you could do a 2,500 square foot lot, half the size and half the price, that's sort of some of the strategy of allowing these smaller lot sizes. And the other thing that they're trying to do is to do this density in a really charming, appealing way that fits into our existing neighborhoods. A lot of people in the land use world call this missing middle housing, and missing middle means the housing that's between single-family homes and apartment buildings. So it includes things like carriage houses and granny flats. So on the top left, that's a really sweet little duplex in Portland. The lighting's not that good. The one on the top is an accessory dwelling unit, and it's a little carriage house in the back of a main house. This one in the bottom left is Wyer's End, which is a cottage cluster over in White Salmon. You should go visit it. It's really nice. And then the one in the bottom right is actually in Pasadena, and it's an old-fashioned bungalow court. And if you've lived in California or other places, you've probably seen them, but they're sort of darling. But they allow maybe 6 or 8 very small houses next to each other in a really charming way. But this is what we don't want. So you can also do density in a really ugly way that kind of ruins a neighborhood. And so you can sort of see these ones where it's just all about the garage. So the other thing that this plan will try to do is add some design standards. It also works on the street grid, which is really, really important, particularly if you look over on the far left, this thing that's called Alignment D. We need another north-south road going from Cascade up to May Street. But if you've ever been there, you know what a crazy hill it is. So this is an engineering and financing challenge, and one of the bigger parts of the plan. We also want to have other ways to get around, so the bike and pedestrian plan's a big part of it. And one of the truisms of density is that more density means more amenities. So if you are talking about having more houses per acre, you need to provide lots more parks and lots more other fun things. So this is the park plan. I want to talk about infrastructure just for a second. There's going to be the next project advisory committee meeting is actually about infrastructure funding. but I wanted to give you just a few little rules of thumb. It's been a big question for people. How do we pay for the infrastructure? The first rule of thumb is that in general, developers pay to build infrastructure. The city and taxpayers don't build to take the sewer out to somebody's development. They don't pay for the water. They don't pay for the roads. Developers have to pay their own way when they build their project. However, once they've sold it, then it does become our problem. So the taxpayers do pay to maintain all those pieces of infrastructure. Density is more productive than sprawl. I just want to do like a little bit of basic math. One of the ways like the Parks District collects money to build parks is they collect systems development charges. And if you build 1,000 houses in one area, you would have a certain amount of systems development charges collected. If you had 2,000 houses in the same area, you would have twice as much. So density is more productive in terms of what it yields to local governments. It's the same way on the just ordinary property tax side. More houses per acre, and it generates more in local property taxes. I mean, this should be important to us because we want our local government to be solvent. We want it to be able to do things like maintain roads and take care of parks. And more extensive is more expensive. Most things, most pieces of infrastructure, you pay for and you pay for maintaining by the foot. So if you're taking care of a road, a longer road costs more to maintain than a shorter road. Same with pipes, yeah? And so the more dense something is, the more different people are contributing to paying for that maintenance. So where we are in the process, we are in the green square on the left, part one. We are on the concept planning phase. We have barely started. I know it feels like we've been doing it a long time, but so the concept planning phase started in about October, and this is the consultants, and there's traffic people and land use people and code writing people working with city staff. There's 2 advisory committees, a technical advisory committee and a project advisory committee, and the general public. There have been open houses, stakeholder interviews, surveys, and they're working together. The next big milestone for the advisory committee meetings, which you guys are welcome to come to, and this is a change in date from what you have printed on your program. They just changed it this afternoon. It's going to be August 16th. The technical advisory committee is at 2. The project advisory committee is at 6, and there's an open house from 5 to 6. You are definitely most invited to the open house, but there's also will be public comment periods during the technical advisory and project advisory committee meeting. And then in September, they'll roll out a draft plan. The topic for the 16th is infrastructure funding and a draft of the zoning code. So what comprises the project plan? There are all of these different things. So there's a concept plan report and a bunch of recommendations for changes. But I want you to recognize that everything that's in this concept plan is a recommendation. It has no force of law. The project team signs up on the concept plan, and nothing happens. Nothing has changed at all in Hood River yet. But the reason why it's important to do a really good job of it and to have it really reflect the values and the desires of the public is because the Planning Commission and the City Council are going to be using that concept plan to guide their work. So then the next plan is the Planning Commission, and they get the concept plan, and they do lots of work sessions on it, they do public hearings, and they take some votes on things that would be changes to the zoning code or amendments to the comprehensive plan. But the things that they vote on, those are also just recommendations. So the Planning Commission is a recommending body. And then finally, the Planning Commission's recommendations get to the City Council, and these guys are the deciders. When they're going to hold work sessions, they'll hold public hearings, you'll have lots of time to talk to them, but they get to actually make the changes that will turn into city rules and law. And they'll do a bunch of zoning things, but they'll also, can't see it quite off the bottom of the slide there, but they also will have the opportunity to do other policies and incentives. So they may want to do some tax incentives to encourage affordable housing, Or they may decide something like, hey, we really need to have another city park. We want to put some city money towards funding a park. Those are the sort of non-zoning things that they might want to handle. And then finally, it gets to Hood River County. And I'm not sure if you can see it that well here, but the project area is the dotted red. And then there's a little dotted black line that's also there. That dotted black line is the city limits. The area between the city limits and the project area is it's called the urban growth area. And it's land that will eventually become part of the city, but it's not now. It's administered by the county. So the county also would need to run this plan through its process of Planning Commission and the Board of Commissioners. I want to end where I started, which is that good planning needs you. I'm so glad you're here today, and I hope you get engaged and stay engaged for the rest of this kind of long but really, really important process. Thanks.